Hello, everyone. Welcome to Astrologer Climate Witness today. I am reading an article that's from a Facebook group that I belong to called Methane Group, but actually, it's not from there. The person who has that group also has a blog called Problems, Predicaments, and Technology. I've been following this group since, good grief, I think 2011, 2012, probably 2012 or so. And this person has developed a blog since then. What I'm going to read today is something that astrologers may really grasp in terms of its title and the concepts behind it. Now, the title is Free Will, the Grand Illusion. Now, astrologers are always saying, but we have free will. The chart doesn't say that you're fated to a certain fate. We're not necessarily talking about the personal, subjective reality of any one particular person. What we're doing here is we're studying the outside external world and how that affects everyone. So when we're talking about free will, you only have free will as far as your material world allows. Okay? So we have to always keep in mind, as I've said before, we're systems within systems within systems within systems. And again, astrologers should be able to grasp that concept. Okay. Free will, the grand illusion. A new article from Dave Pollard really got me thinking, and my desire to tie together the material I have already compiled and to make sense of it all, along with the material I was reading, made me realize that here was a new article in the making. It takes much humility to comprehend exactly how small we really are in this universe, how interconnected to everything else we are, and how much of our attention is spent doing all the things we are more or less pre-programmed to do by biology, genetics, instinct, and conditioning. Now, I know astrologers can relate to the concept of how small we are, but yet how interconnected everything is. Okay? Many or most people believe in free will, despite the fact that no such thing actually exists. The rest of what we do is chosen from a set of mostly pre-programmed options, indoctrinated into us from cultural programming. Now, I remember reading Dane Rudyard. He was the first one that brought to me the concept that we can break through our cultural conditioning. I read this early in my 20s, very early. And that's true, astrologically speaking. You can go beyond your family's religious understandings or indoctrination. You can go past your educational orientation. You can do a lot in terms of breaking through cultural conditioning, but yet there is this physical limitation. Okay, let me continue here. Our behavior is based upon a set of pre-existing rules, so in reality we do not have free will. Many people claim that we have free will, but that it is limited to those pre-existing rules. Again, this isn't taking reality into consideration. For instance, many people think that if they could go back in the past, they would have done something differently. They're forgetting that whatever it was that they did, that they think they would do differently, was done that way, based on a set of decisions or reasons, and those decisions or reasons would not change based upon the knowledge that was available to them at that point in time. Given the same circumstances and the same knowledge, they had at the time, more than likely the exact same choice would be made today. Now, I think a lot of times when people talk about, they say, well, if I knew then what I know now, I would do something different. Well, of course. But he's saying, if you go back in time, you're not going to know what you know now, basically. I often say that, yes, we are a species just like other species, except, yes, we are more conscious. It doesn't mean we've been conscious enough to not destroy our total habitat. We weren't conscious enough to do that. The habitat, the biosphere that we live in that keeps us alive is dying. And it's based on the way we've chosen to develop our way of life. It was happening somewhat before fossil fuels, but once we decided to use fossil fuels, the destruction went on steroids. There's so many people out there that listen to solutions that say, we can have everything we've always had. We can do everything we've always done. We just need to do this technology and that technology. You have no idea, if you're not trying to find out more, what that really means. What is the root under that? That is the top of civilization trying to hold on to their power and their money. And again, this is not some great grand conspiracy. It's just kind of the nature of human beings, animals. The consciousness that we have, it is different than the other animals, but it doesn't mean what a lot of people think it means. We had the chance, you could say, by being somewhat conscious, to look beyond our immediate needs and our wants. That's the key right there. And do something different and make different choices. And the really awful thing is, those leading us did know what most people are figuring out now. They did know that burning fossil fuels was going to change the climate. They knew that in 1850s, when it was first discovered that CO2 could warm the planet. They knew that as time goes on, they knew that even more so, starting in the 50s when they put the measuring device at the top of Mauna Loa. They've known that the fossil fuel companies, you have to listen carefully here, the fossil fuel companies knew by the end of the 70s and into the 80s for sure. Their own scientists that they pay to do this work knew and told them. Congress has all the documents. It's down on paper. All the communications between the scientists and the top CEOs, etc., at these oil companies. They knew, but they put the exact opposite out there, just as they're doing now. Talking about green diesel. Oh my God. It is, they know people aren't learning about this. The amount of CO2 that's already concentrated in the biosphere is enough to continue warming the planet for another 30 years or so without us ever putting more in. And that in itself is extremely devastating. We can't afford to put more in, even if it's green diesel, which that's not going to be that much less CO2. We can't afford more, no matter what it is. We can't afford to keep emissions going. You're adding to the concentration. This is what people have to understand. You're always adding to the concentration. Okay, let me go back to reading this now. I have written 2 different articles based on the same topic which are tied into many of my other articles, one titled Agency, Do We Have Free Will? And the other titled The Grand Delusion. These were to explain why so many different ideas, which otherwise might help, on how to deal with the predicaments we face might be technically possible, but are realistically infeasible. Some ideas, in parentheses, anything dealing with technology use, take us to the wrong direction altogether and will not help. Most of the ideas that actually gain widespread support from society fall into the second category, while the ones that actually might help do not win such support. Admittedly, few people are interested in reducing technology use, promoting degrowth, and promoting the abandonment of the system of civilization, even though this is not really optional. Either way, we do it voluntarily, or either we do it voluntarily or nature will do it for us. This is what people don't get. If we continue using fossil fuels, like in Congress the other night, when during the State of the Union, we're not really talking politics here, because both sides are still doing pretty much the same thing with a little bit of a different slant. Although, well, anyways, they laughed at Biden when he said, "Oh, we're going to need fossil fuels for at least another 10 years," and they laughed, and that was mostly the Republicans. But yeah, billions of people will die if we stop using fossil fuels, but also billions of people are going to die if we continue to use fossil fuels. This is what they've done to us. This is what we need to get across to people. We have painted ourselves in a corner that we cannot get out of without a massive amount of hurt, no matter what we do. Okay, I'm going to continue. Okay. Okay, I said that. Most of the ideas that actually gain widespread support from society fall into the second category, as I read. Okay. Okay. This is the bind we are in, and the longer we continue bargaining with the predicament, instead of accepting the truth, the faster we condemn ourselves to extinction. Much of this disconnect with reality has to do with the human inability to think systemically and our inability to understand the exponential function. In addition, very few people can see all that far down the road in general. Yet, another factor also is responsible for this disconnect with reality. Urbanization has accomplished two very important things to society. It has separated people psychologically from the ecosphere and has separated them physically from the ecosphere that actually sustains them. Ecosystems that actually sustain them. I want to read that again. It has separated people psychologically from the ecosphere, and it has separated them physically from the ecosystems that actually sustain them. This makes having an ecological knowledge and a connection with nature almost impossible without actually having this pointed out and the person having an actual interest in discovering the truth. My travels over the last decade have made this painfully obvious to me, and I have countless pictures of trailheads, parks, nature centers, and other natural recreational spots where I am the only person there. 20 years ago, these places would have all been packed with people, just like all the similar places I visited back then. The denial of reality is precisely part of the human nature and what has allowed us to get to this point in time. Without technology use, negative feedbacks would have kept our numbers in check to a sustainable level. Going back to quip about things that could be done, which might actually help reduce ecological overshoot being technically possible but realistically infeasible, this more or less means that, yes, we could do these things, but we won't. Why we won't has to do with the entrenched systems of civilization and civilizational inertia, in addition to the maximum power principle. These are simple, objective biophysical realities, no differently than civilization being inherently unsustainable. The civilization we've developed is unsustainable. Whether a person agrees with that reality or not is more or less entirely irrelevant because his or her opinion won't change those facts. Okay, going back to the disconnect that's developed between human beings and nature. That's extremely important, what they're trying to say here. Because it's not just, oh, I'm going to go out for a walk and I'm going to connect with nature. It's that real, deep knowing inside a human being that used to exist so that they could read the habitat around them and they knew what was happening in that habitat, weather-wise, soil-wise, animal-wise. They were inherently part of it. They were very physically and mentally and emotionally connected, and they could tell what was going on around them without hardly thinking about it. Now we are so disconnected. You could walk outside generally and everything else is going on in your head, but you're not really connected, even if you're walking out there. Now, I try, and I've been trying to get connected for years and years because I always walk. I used to run, but even that, the running, you're probably kind of missing a lot, although there was some walking in there to get ready and all that. But now I walk a lot, and I live rurally, so I'm probably a little more connected than many because I've always been trying to do that. And in my 20s, I worked outdoors, etc. But it's not the same as someone who depends on their immediate habitat, the environment around them, to live. We don't have that anymore. I grow a garden every year, but I don't think I have that deep rooted connection. It might be partly there because I've been here for all these years and I do it every year. But it's not the same thing because I can still go to the grocery store. I can still, go buy even secondhand clothes. I mean, the people they're talking about had a complete dependence upon their habitat around them, and they knew it. They knew everything about it. It was in their bones. One of the things I understand about false beliefs and denial is that knowledge doesn't change behavior. Oh boy, with astrology, I've seen this now. I have a tendency over the past few years to become a little depressed because I will give a reading for someone and I can help them to a certain degree. And they might become logically aware of particular parts of their personality, but can they change it? No matter how devastating it is for them or destructive, they're not able necessarily at that time. Over time, certain knowledge, it may take a while and it could sink in and then they can change their behavior. But it really is difficult for a lot of astrologers to see somebody not be able to take what you're doing for them, the knowledge you're giving them, and use it and to help themselves. And so it's the same with this information about climate change, biodiversity loss. We're not helping ourselves. There's plenty of scientists out there that know how devastating all of this is. And they've known for a long time. They were trying to get some kind of change for the last 30, 40 years. The whole fight for climate change has been going on even longer than that. They knew it was coming. And yet we've not done one thing that would really matter. And this is going to be shown right here. A person will only change his or her behavior when he or she is ready, period. No amount of persuasion, pleading, or negotiations will have any long-term effect until and unless the person is actually ready to change. So even though I constantly put out these articles in hopes of at least raising a few eyebrows, I'm not expecting any major societal changes in behavior. The major societal changes won't take place until the relative abundance we have today is gone. And people are truly struggling Now, of course, there's plenty of people around the world that are at this point, but we're talking about the dominant culture, the dominant economic culture. We're not struggling yet, not enough. So educating people about ecological overshoot or telling them that they need to do this or any other form of attempting to change behavior will have a negligible effect collectively. What my attempts here are meant to accomplish is for the reader to understand that he or she is not alone, that these things are happening, that we are deep into the overshoot and collapse, that the mass extinction we are in is real as well, and that all of this is irreversible. Sure, we may be able to, with enough fossil fuel hydrocarbon energy, in parentheses, to forestall extinction in a few species right now, but once that magic energy is gone, then what? Oops. While I was writing this, I noticed a new video from Nate Hagen's The Great Simplification series, featuring William Reese. Some of the ideas I've incorporated here come directly from Dave Pollard's article and Nate's video with Bill. Ironically, the point of this article is to bring about the reality of our lack of agency to the forefront, and Bill reiterates that rather wonderfully at about one hour. Sorry. 1 hour 39 minutes 22nd point in the video. I actually had to chuckle because it is so true, and he is every bit as passionate about it as I am. He also confirms the bargaining to maintain civilization. It's yet another excellent conversation from both Nate and Bill. Okay. The sad truth about all of this is the fact that despite rosy predictions I see from some people, the facts and observations line up quite well with my understanding of the science. Perhaps I would seriously like to be able to see something wrong with my comprehension, something that would lead me to think that my understanding is too dark. My fear is that my understanding might actually be too conservative, and that conditions will turn out worse than I think. I honestly think that we have far less control over these predicaments than many people think we do, and I am convinced that the systems we depend on for our very sustenance are in a state of collapse already. Lots of scientists publicly claim that we can turn things around, in quotation marks, to mitigate climate change and other predicaments. But if this is actually the case, then why aren't we even making a dent in the observable measurements? CO2 is still rising. All of the trends and trajectories are still going the wrong way. This is why privately most climate scientists and many other scientists as well are quite fearful of what is unfolding. And another thing, we haven't been able to separate growing an economy from producing CO2. The more you grow, the more CO2 you're going to produce. We haven't separated those two things yet. No matter what they talk about with renewables, etc., it's not working. At the end of the day, one can only conclude that the future, regardless of precisely how it turns out, is going to be one which features increasing levels of chaos, continuous streams of hazards brought about by extreme weather events and climate change, and far less throughputs of energy and resources. I'm going to go back because it's got a lot in blue here that you can. So his article, this is an article about the other articles. So he's got the one, the Grand Delusion, which, here we go. This is part 3. So what should we do? One of the things that is so pervasive in today's society is the constant flow of hype, advertising, marketing, and propaganda, and many people fail to see through it. Steve Bull came out with this article, it's also in blue, explaining the same scenario. They are led to believe that everything is a problem and that technology or some product produced from technology can solve it all. The truth is that technology and its use is actually the root source of these issues, and they are predicaments, not problems. Furthermore, more or new technology can do nothing but cause yet more damage. Technology is what supports civilization. As I pointed out in my last article, agriculture is technology. Since civilization is unsustainable, we cannot fix portions of civilization and stop the damage caused by civilization, which is causing those portions to develop trouble in the first place. In other words, we cannot switch out ICE, internal combustion engine, that's internal combustion engine, cars for EVs or coal or gas-produced electricity, coal or gas-produced electricity, for non-renewable solar panels and wind turbine-produced electricity and claim that we have solved anything. All the exact same mechanisms civilization uses to destroy life on this planet are still intact. So switching out or substituting different portions of civilization won't help. Civilization cannot be made sustainable. This is precisely why building all of this infrastructure in an effort to reduce emissions is nothing more than bargaining to maintain civilization. One of my friends, Sherry Young, pointed this out. Quote, historian H. Maynard Smith contended that a person who could perceive two conflicting sides of an issue might be overwhelmed by a mentally inflexible person. A broad-minded man who can see both sides of the question and is ready to hold opposed truths while confessing that he cannot reconcile them is at a manifest disadvantage with a narrow-minded man who sees but one side, sees it clearly, and is ready to interpret the whole Bible, or, if need be, the whole universe, in accordance with his formula. The illusion of control or agency and the attachment to it creates such suffering. There are so many important distinctions with regard to the set of predicaments we find ourselves enmeshed in. These distinctions seriously need to be explained so that people can understand better where we truly are, where we would like to be, whether or not going to those places is actually possible, and if going to those places is possible, how to get there, a roadmap of sorts. For instance, many people often do not comprehend our lack of agency or ability to solve these predicaments because they think that we can do whatever we want to do, free will, or perhaps they do not understand the difference between a problem and a predicament. This seems simple enough on the surface, not much differently than I can choose my own destiny, right? Well, the truth is that I can choose my own destiny as long as it conforms to all the previous natural laws and preceding events leading up to said choice. Essentially, I am constrained to make choices that fit into that box. Our minds tend to go into denial of reality on this. They wish for us to have free will. Quote, Spinoza, in his essay on ethics, put it beautifully short and exactly to the point. There is no such thing as free will. The mind is induced to wish this or that by some cause, and that cause is determined by another cause, and so back to infinity. My only intention is to show that freedom of choice does not automatically infer free will. That is, the choices one makes are caused by past experiences. Past experiences and genetic makeup are the molding forces that created the will, which determined the action. Choices and actions are determined by the person you are, which was determined by your hereditary and environment. Okay, I'm going to have to close it up here, guys. We have company, but I think you can grasp a little bit of what I'm talking about here. We are constrained by our physical environment. We have a finite planet. Now, astrologically, I'm going to go back again to Pluto and Capricorn. This is a big deal. We have been here before. We have been in Pluto in Capricorn before. We had not learned the lessons of transforming our concept of resource use. We have not learned that. We keep thinking that efficiency is going to make a difference. All efficiency does, as Tim Garrett, the physicist, has pointed out in his research and his papers, that the more efficient we are, the more energy we use. The more people we make, the more we continue to use resources because we come up with new ideas for new products. Every time a new entrepreneur comes on this shark show, whatever that's called, we're making a new product. Do we need a new product? No, it's about making a job or making a business for somebody to make a living. But that's not making a real living. We have to get this through our heads. That is making a unsustainable life choice in order to live in civilization. And as we can see, civilization is not sustainable. So all we need to come to terms with is trying to accept the fact that we are a somewhat conscious species. And yes, in our own minds and in our own hearts, we can do our best to behave, to make choices, to make our lives somewhat more emotionally happy and the people around us happy so that we're not all miserable. But the outer world is going to do what it does. And we're going to have to deal with that. It's like anyone in a war scene, in a war environment. What do they call that? The not stage. Anyway, if you're in that, you can either crumble and fall apart and give up, or you can make the best of it while you can. But that doesn't mean it's going to change the outside circumstances. We're beyond that at this point. You can't change the outside circumstances, and that's all the leaders are trying to do. They're trying to change the outside circumstances with, digging up more resources out of the earth, raping the earth, destroying habitat, destroying ecosystems by whether it's coal from the past, oil, or whether it's more copper, more lithium, more cobalt, more neodymium, and more cement, because we're running out of sand. I've said this before. Pluto and Capricorn has been the biggest thing over the past since 2008. And it was our last, I can't even say it was our last chance. I think the last time it was here was our last chance. When the United States was born, it was our last chance. We could have done something then. We had a whole country that was, basically untouched. The Native Americans that were here, the natives that were here, they had pretty much taken pretty good care of it. And we came along with our Western patriarchal mindset, and we just ripped across it. Digging, polluting, damaging, and destroying. I know there's going to be many people that listen to this, and they're really going to hate what I'm saying. You look at our civilization, and you think we've made progress. That's not progress. Up here and in here would have been progress. But we haven't done that. All it became about was money and ownership. And they have not learned the difference between what is spiritual progress and material progress.